Hello and welcome to Shy Talk, an Irish history podcast. My name's Kevin Larney.
And I'm Jason Brennan.
Damn, I was going to give it to you this time.
No, I knew you're going to set it up. You were going to get my hopes up, and you're going to say something silly, and I would have had to play it off like I'm okay with it because I'm a comedian and I'm meant to be able to take jokes. But sometimes they hurt on a personal level.
You're supposed to roll with the punches, but there's still punches.
Sticks and stones may break my bones, but the punches hurt far more.
They leave emotional bruises. Welcome back to part 2 of the Kit Cavanagh. I don't want to say saga. I don't know if it's what's the saga version of 2.
The
sequel, I suppose.
The squeakquel.
The squeakquel. Kit Cavanagh, the squeakquel.
Is that Alvin and the Chipmunks?
David Cross's finest work. But if you want a brief overview of the Kit Cavanagh story, I can't give it to you. If you want a proper overview of the story so far, just go back and listen to last week's episode.
Yeah, it's all there, and it's long.
It's long. It's not, it's not that long. But before we get into it, this week's shout-outs, Jason. I don't know if you read this, because I actually missed it, and I'm just reading it now. But one of our listeners sent us some cash funds at buymeacoffee.com. James O'Farrell, and he said, while searching for a serious history podcast, I stumbled upon yours. Your show is now a guilty pleasure of mine. You are like the Beavis and Butthead of Irish history. Keep up the good work.
I did see that. I want to know which one of us is Beavis and which one is Butthead.
These are the real questions.
I don't know why. Why is it a guilty pleasure of people? Why can't people just enjoy it? They have to preface it with being like, It's
not like you're hiding in the bathroom with a tub of Ben and Jerry's listening to this podcast while your wife is outside listening to the Irish Times podcast, sipping Merlot and discussing the latest Finn Dwyer with her friends. And you're out in the bag shed, mainlining Shy Talk.
Should we start an online, like a podcast beef with Finn Dwyer?
No, I don't think so. I think he'd run circles.
Is he too big? He'd take us down.
He's too big. He'd come over and beat us up. But so thanks, thanks, James. But another shout out is for our longtime friend of the podcast and real life friend is Ali O'Rourke. Had another correction for us this week. She sent me a voice message. Apparently, I've been saying Ochrim wrong for about 6 episodes now. I guess the last reference to the Battle of Ochrim pushed her over the edge. I keep saying Ogrim or Ogrim, but in my defense, don't say Ochrim yet. Don't. You sat idly by. You said nothing for 6 weeks, and now all of a sudden you're like, yeah, Ochrim. Yeah, everyone knows that.
Yeah, but like some people, like you don't shatter people's illusions. It just like it's you're up there on your pedal stool, and you're like. It's your damn squid.
Yeah.
It's your damn squid. No, yeah, it's Ochrim, of course.
Ochrim, yeah, alright.
Also, I would like to reference that thing the other week when I was right by accident when I was calling Limerick the Treaty County. I specifically called it the Treaty County for that very reason, and then it was proved to be right.
You didn't know that.
You were kind of correct.
You didn't know that.
Why the fuck else would I have called it the Treaty County?
Because you're a chancer.
Yeah, so thanks to Ali and everybody else for the support, and you can reach out to us at Shy Talk History at Instagram, and just type in Shy Talk History and we'll be everywhere. So you can contact us, email us,
LinkedIn,
follow us on the Instagram, LinkedIn, Ask Jeeves. What else are we on? We just set up a Bing? Is Bing still a thing?
We're on. Well, actually, I was going to say we're on Wikipedia, but we're not. So we could. I'll fix that this evening. I'll stick us up there.
Yeah, but speaking of other podcasts, we're on one. We're about to be. We're recording this podcast directly before we go out on as special guests on a live stream for Candlelit Tales. Do you want to tell people about that, Kevin?
Yeah, Candlelit Tales. So yeah, the episode should be recorded by the time you're listening to this, and you can listen to them wherever you're listening to this podcast. They do retellings of Irish mythology in their own style, which is very funny and very entertaining. And then they've got like a musical backing to it of sort of folk trad music style to it. But they're very good, and you should listen to their podcast and go see their live shows at some point in the year 2021 when we're allowed outside again.
And it's a live stream that we're doing on YouTube with them. So you can see our faces if you want, if that's a thing that people want to do.
Sure. But it'll have happened 2 days ago by the time you listen to this. So,
but it hasn't happened yet.
But it hasn't happened yet for us. But so yeah, I think that's it. So here is the second part of the Kit Cavanagh story. The tale of Christian Davy, the Marauder.
Gather around now, you're in for a story. Old tales of lore on search over glory. The history and mystery of lads, lasses and all. Discoveries and voyages, the rise and the fall. Follow me now as we go back in time. We trace the steps of Irish lineage to find. Jason from Carlisle and Kevin the dog. Guide you through the ways of Shining.
So when we left Kit last week, she'd just seen her husband Richard after 12 long years, and he's in the arms of another woman. She was visibly shook, and when a comrade asked her what was up, she said that she thought she'd just seen her long-lost brother, Richard. And she asked her comrade to go up to the man and ask him when he'd last heard from his wife and children.
Oh, wait. That's not very sly. Wait, so...
That's...
What?
Yeah, I don't know, but also... So the guy goes up and says it to him.
You've already recited enough quotes. Now, maybe it's because time has passed, and I know for sure that I'm a better writer given time than, freestyling on a mic. Say freestyling, like when I talk absolute nonsense, that's like rap.
Yeah.
But like maybe it's just she's caught in the heat of the moment, going, how do I approach this situation? Go up and ask him, when was the last time you heard from your wife and kids, you absolute bastard?
Yeah.
Or
well, that's it.
Or why not ask him like, hey, is your name perchance Richard? He would be more likely to go, yes, were you in one of the infantries or some division, or do I know you from back home? Don't walk up and be like, I got someone else to walk up and go, hey, you bastard.
Well, also because there's another woman on his lap at the time. So he's just going to walk up to him and be like, hey, when was the last time you heard from your wife and kids? Yeah. Your wife and 3 children?
Oh, no, she's an absolute cockblock, is what she is.
She's sending this man to block a cock for her. So Welsh told the man that he was in the main guard and that he'd speak to him there, which is basically him just being like, I'm a little busy here. I'll chat to you later on. So
I'm a little busy adultering at the minute. If you could,
yeah, exactly. Don't be coming up to me asking me about my wife and kids when I'm trying to get something going here. So she goes to accidentally bump into him while he's on guard duty, but when she shows up later on, she's informed that he's in an inn across the road. And when she walked in there, he's drinking pints with the same Dutch woman.
Oh no!
Now at this stage, Kit has been living as a man for a long time. A couple of years, and it's obviously gotten into her psyche because when confronted with this situation, she does what any man would do, Jason.
Yeah, can I guess? Does she herself try to crack on and ride the Dutch woman?
Close.
As a way of shattering Richard's confidence.
That'll actually come up later on, but no, this time she takes another play from the playbook of men. She orders a load of pints and goes and sits in the corner, staring at them and subtly crying.
Ah, yes, the Jason Brennan method.
Yes, a classic. Always a favourite.
Yeah. Well, what you want to do is then maybe, not that night, but maybe once every 3 months, just send them a really long Instagram message just saying how much you still love them and how much you think about them. And I'm not being weird or a creep, I'm just letting you know in case, are you seeing anyone? Are you seeing anyone now? And then the pints are there. Is that...
That's pretty much what she's done, yes. But so after a while, she gets herself together. I assume she's just in the corner, writing letters and then ripping them up and throwing them in the bin. But she composes herself and asks the landlady of the inn to send Welsh over to her, like soldier to soldier.
Together, standing tall.
Yeah, a great tune. Kit's sitting in the shadow, so Richard doesn't recognize her straight away. And Kit asks, "When's the last time you heard from your wife and kids?" To which he says, "I have heard no news in these 12 years, though I have written no less than 12 letters." Which...
I send her a letter once a year, and then...
Yeah, exactly.
That's amazing.
But also, Jason, once a year, but if you cast your mind back, that's the same amount of letters he'd claimed to have sent in the letter that he sent her in 1693. He was like, I've written you 11 other times. So he sent no letters since. He sent 12 letters at once, like 5 years ago. Sorry, no, 12 years ago. And then that's it.
Yeah. But I mean, if you send 12 letters, eventually you get, I suppose she would have responded. He just didn't send them. He basically sent one letter, right?
He sent, because he claims, so now all these years later he says 12 letters. I feel like 12 is a sort of default lying number. I think he sent one letter and then that was it.
Yeah, and in the first letter he was like, I have written you 11 other times. I can't believe they haven't got to you. I swear if you just keep checking the mailbox, they'll be on the way, or else I'll do more from now on to make sure they all get to you. And then just stops. And then 12 years later is asked, when was the last time you heard? I've been sending 12 a year for the last 12 years. I think that's what it is. I think it's every month I send 12. Is it every day I send 12 letters? I remember at some point I started a lie where I said 12.
Yeah, it's definitely just his lying number. He's like, I swear I wrote to her 12 times. 12 times a day.
Yeah, how many pints did you have tonight? I'd say no more than 12. No more, no less than 12.
Do you know how fast you were driving?
How long was this 9 years war? I'd say give or take 12 years.
I'll be there in 12 minutes. I'm just getting into the car now. But Kit makes herself known to him, and she lays into him with a classic "How dare you" speech.
How very dare him.
She says that she left behind a life of peace and plenty, abandoned her children, their children, lest he forget, which apparently he has forgot, to go and search for him. Although, like, she leaves out the part that she was back home and didn't bother seeing their kids. She sort of leaves that bit out of the... It would sort of take away from the message of the angry rant.
Is that kind of like in that movie, that documentary, Searching for Sugar Man?
Oh, yeah.
You know, about Rodriguez, the guy, and how they never really reference the fact until the end of the film, like in the credits, that, he never made it big. He also went on, like, multiple tours of Australia, New Zealand, around, like, you know, he made money, he just didn't have other songs. Like, it just didn't work for him.
Yeah. But, so, you know, she's laying into him, the classic "How dare you." He counters, softballs back with a possibly the first iteration of a classic line. "She means nothing to me. It's just a temporary folly. It's always been you, baby," or words to that effect. But at this point, like any classic rom-com, this is like the...
She was a mistake. I've seen her no more than 12 times.
I've known her 12 minutes. Well, he does pretty much say that. But at this point, the Dutch woman walks in and Kit asks her if Richard is her husband, to which she said, "Oh yeah." So she's like, "Okay, we're not technically engaged, but he says that as soon as he can settle down," he said in 12 months, he's gonna produce the ring. So so they've been living together as man and wife for a year now. So
that's 12 months.
Kit tells her. So Kit tells the Dutch woman that Richard is married and has 3 kids, which sends the Dutch woman flying off the handle, understandably. And now Richard's doing like this again. It's like classic Act 1 of a rom-com. He's trying to do this balance of like, "Baby, I can explain."
Yeah. He's brought 2 girls to the prom on the same night, and he's trying to divide it. Yeah,
trying to calm Kit down, but also he doesn't want to go too hard against the Dutch woman. He's kind of like John Churchill. He wants to play both sides. He doesn't want to go full nuclear on the Dutch woman in case he can't get Kit back. He doesn't want to be like, you know, she means nothing to me in front of her. He's sort of trying to play both fields and not doing very well. So the Dutch woman storms out. Richard tries to get back with Kit, but she tells him to go feck himself. But since she's grown to like this soldiering life, and she kind of wants to continue her military career, she proposes that they agree to live like brothers. He won't blow her cover, and in return, she won't murder him for being a prick.
I mean, at that stage, would you not just... I get it, like, yeah, he left, and now he's seeing this other woman, but, like, it's been 12 years. Like,
yeah.
If at that stage he's willing to go, like, I will drop this right now to get back with you, I'm so sorry, I'd go with it. Because I feel like if it was me, I'd be like, if he's willing to, like, throw it all away, like the actual marriage he already has, it probably means he still cares for you.
Yeah. Well, there are some feelings there, but I think that she's angry at him. So they agree to, like, that they'll say that they're brothers and that they'll continue on like that.
Typical man, can't let things go.
No, but they see each other a lot over the next few days, and he tries to rekindle the marriage, but she's not having any of it.
No, they definitely right.
No, she's done with him, sort of. Well, she swears that she wants to feel those 12 inches again, Kev. At least that's what Richard always said. But then when it came time for Kit to make her own tube, and she measured out 12 inches finally after all these years, she found herself in shock.
Centimeters have been inches this whole time.
But so Kit swears to herself that if she ever survived the war, she'd return to Dublin, drop to the skies, and resume her old life. And after the prisoners are secured in Breda, they both return to the war. They're in different regiments, so they go their separate ways.
Oh, it's sad.
So it's the winter of 1704. She's kind of rested up in the barracks in the Netherlands, and she goes on leave to The Hague for a few days, where she, by chance, manages to be sitting beside a pretty Dutch woman on a boat on the way to Amsterdam.
Oh no!
And well, this is right. So this is another instance where, like, as a joke, she starts hitting on the woman.
It's not that Dutch woman. It's a different.
No. It's not. It's a different Dutch woman. There's many Dutch women, and this is or Vrouw, as she refers to them, which I think is like how Frau is the German. I think Vrouw is the Dutch for a woman. Don't know. Anyway, okay. She refers to her as her Vrouw. So they get a boat together. They end up going to Amsterdam, and then she ends up going back to the woman's house in Rotterdam. They have a couple of glasses of wine, and then the woman's sister comes in to say that their mother isn't feeling well. So Kit excuses herself for the evening, went into town, and this is her quote, took up a lodging for the night on the Scots Dyke.
Scots is a funny word.
It is a funny word. I mean,
what's
at
a
this
Scots
stage,
dyke?
I guess there's a lot of a dyke is a dam. There's a lot of dams in the Netherlands. I just thought it interesting that this is certainly, like, there's no one else around. Like, this isn't a joke anymore. This is just her hitting on a woman. They hang around for the day. She ends up going back to her house. They have a couple of glasses of wine. Like, I don't know what she's at. But when she goes back to stay at the other place, she bumps into a friend that she knew from the army called John Beggs, who also knows the family of the woman that she just met. So they agreed to go on some sort of double date there the next day. She says that she's going to pass her stay in Rotterdam in an agreeable and amusing way.
Oh, this is, I'm going to guess now, this is where it all gets unraveled and everyone realizes that she's a girl.
You're wrong, but when she goes back to the house, she realizes that the reason that John knows them is because it's a brothel, and she gets quite annoyed that when she finds out that this wasn't just some woman hitting on her. She was a mark, basically, and that she was like being brought back to a brothel. And then when Kit tries to storm out, her new friend won't let her leave until she pays for the wine that she drank the night before. So she's...
This is great. I love
getting
this.
swindled by possibly the oldest trick in the book there.
Like, this is brilliant because it's something that... Now, look, that's never happened to me in terms of a bit of mark with that, but it's like, for sure, a lot of guys over the years have, like, bought drinks for girls that have no intention of talking to them or don't want to, they just want to drink. Like, we've all of these things that are associated with, like, the regular dating game. I remember before my ex, when she was visiting me in Ireland, she came over and we were in a gay bar. It was a gin bar in Temple Bar, I think. I forget the name of the place. But we were in there, and then she ends up meeting two gay dudes who she becomes best friends with because she's been talking to them for 5 minutes. And it brings them over to the table. Like, kind of ruins our night because one of them's a gay dude who voted against same-sex marriage in Ireland, but then is getting married against his will by his partner. And the other guy was some lecturer in DIT who clearly had a healthy amount of alcoholism, but maybe a not so healthy amount of self-loathing.
Sure.
But within like maybe 20 minutes into the conversation or so, they'd been talking about it, and they were like, "Oh yeah, but you know, even if I wasn't a woman, I wouldn't be into you." Like, that's what they had said to her. And then there was a lesbian couple as well that they were like, "No, you just wouldn't be our type either." So there was like 4 people that were like no, I'm not really into it. And she, in fairness, my ex was very good looking. So it was obviously such a shock to her system that she was like annoyed about the fact that, fair enough, the two gay guys, but the two lesbians that were like, you wouldn't be our type. She was so pissed about that. And I made one joke about the entire thing on the way home, and she blew her fucking lid at me. I was like, this is what every dude ever has to deal with, like, on a daily basis. Or like, yeah, you seem really nice, but I don't want to have sex with you. And like, we just get conditioned to it now, and it's fine. But she,
and even though she was like, obviously, she wasn't. Oh, yeah, she didn't want to have sex with them, but even just the reboot was like, what do you mean?
Yeah, what do you mean you wouldn't have sex with me? What do you mean you don't want to have sex with me? I'm like, I don't know how many times I can be like it's fine. That's just like, cool.
Yeah. So, yeah, it is, I get what it is funny to see Kit being exposed to some of the other sides of male life, I suppose. So she continues fighting with her regiment through 1705, spends another winter in Holland, and then back to the fighting in 1706. She gets really into the marauding, scavengering side of the battles. So the system after these battles seems to be that they just destroy the town. And then they sell all the stuff to merchants who follow the camps. So she said, like, they broke apart the church bells for metal. We spared nothing, killing, burning, or otherwise destroying whatever we could carry off. Which doesn't sound very nice.
Not good.
This isn't the sort of gentlemanly pursuits that people go off to war for.
Everyone in this story so far seems like a bit of a prick.
Yeah. Again, this is a bit that you need to leave out of the 2020 film, the bit where she, like, loves robbing things.
Yeah, like abandons her kids, robs shit.
Yeah. In May, her regiment fought against the French at the Battle of Ramilles in the Spanish Netherlands. She survived the worst of the battle, but when it was all over and they'd won, either a shell fell by accident or the French fired like one last "fuck you" at them, but she was hit in the back of the head and it fractured her skull. She was knocked out and was in a catatonic state when they brought her back to the hospital.
A catatonic state?
She was in a catatonic state. Now, Kit wouldn't have let a little thing like a fractured skull get in the way of her fighting career, but this time it must have been some newfangled medicine man from the West. I don't know how, but somehow they finally realised that she was a woman while they were changing
coming over
their dressing.
here with his leeches and his snakes and his ability to distinguish penises from vaginas. Which sources? Doctory. I don't believe it.
And I'm sorry. Who are you again? As like some guy stands there with one of those pandemic hoods, 7 leeches and a hacksaw. Like, how dare you come into my place of business? Start talking about penises and vaginas. How very dare you, sir? I'll chop off his legs. So the truth's finally out. They send for her commanding officer, Brigadier Preston, and he sends for her brother, Richard, to find out more about the situation. Word makes it to Lord Hay, who's the Scots Greys Brigade commander. He talks to Kit's bunkmate, who claimed that he had no idea she was a woman. He said it was common knowledge that Christian Welch had a son with a prostitute that he'd taken care of. So then Hay summons Richard Welch, and Welch told him all about their meeting, their marriage, how he got conscripted into the army, and how Kit came looking for him. So when Kit gained consciousness, she was worried that this would be the end of her time in the army. She seemed mostly worried that it'd be the end of her marauding because, it's a great money spinner. But instead of getting kicked out of the army, Kit found out that she'd become an overnight celebrity and was commended for her quick-wittedness and bravery.
Quick-kittedness.
Yeah. That was pretty quick-kitted of you. After Hayes heard the whole story from the two of them, he ordered that her pay continue and announced that she would be under the care of the army. So when she recovered from her wound after about 10 weeks, she was discharged from the Scots Greys with a handsome bonus.
I thought you were saying she was in care of the army, so she'd be sent home without an acceptable pension and then left to deal with PTSD all of her own, and it would become her family's problem.
Yeah, exactly, yeah. She'd have veteran communities where they would look after each other, but there would be no oversight and no payment or trained professionals, so it would basically just be people with PTSD looking after other people with PTSD, and then that'd be fine.
Yeah, and then to be consistently told that you were the problem and you caused this hurt in the world instead of it being the actual leaders of countries and democracies. Sure. But anyway, go on.
So, but there's also a thing where, like, they find out she's a woman and everyone's like, Excellent job. We never suspected for a minute. Well done. You've truly shown the determinism of your sex. But also, they're like, no, absolutely not. You cannot get back into the army.
Yes, this is before the time where they had to get rid of those questions from the introduction manual.
Sure. But it's weird that they acknowledge that she's like done a good job, but at the same time, now that they know the truth, they won't let her fight. But so Brigadier Preston asks her, will you continue to torture your husband now that the jig is up? And she said that the main reason she stayed away from him in the first place was that a great belly could not have been concealed. And now that the cover is blown, she has no objection to resuming the marriage, so herself and Richard are remarried on the battlefield.
Oh, what?
Yeah, so you're right. I mean, I don't really know what she's doing. I think she obviously still has feelings for him. And she says the main reason that, like, she didn't get together with him that time she met is because, like, if she got pregnant, it would be much harder to... Even these medical doctors would have probably copped on after a while. Kit probably could have said she had an STD for a couple of weeks before they finally figured out it was the worst STD of all. Pregnancy.
Yes. Are you just repurposing some of my on-stage material?
Yeah, I got this from the Jason Brennan special. But, so true to her previous worry, Kit does get pregnant the first night that they're together again. But she continues on in the army.
Oh, yeah, sure that happens.
Well, as in, like, she doesn't give birth for another couple of months.
But so she just so decides to get back with him at the exact same time that she gets pregnant.
Maybe.
Oh, yes, right, I don't believe I've ever heard this story before.
You're right, actually, because a lot of this doesn't make any sense, but that would fill in a couple of gaps.
You do have to tend to read between the lines in history to be like, it's just wink and nods that it's like, yeah, for sure she's gotten pregnant with somebody else, and it's like, I'm now kicked out of the army. I have nowhere to go, can't go home, haven't seen the kids for a long time. Hey, Richard, is it too late to take you up on that offer that you've been... Yeah, no? Okay, good, awesome, cool, I love you.
Yeah, okay, so maybe it is opportune timing. But, so she joins back up with the regiment. She's first joins them as a cook, but having to cook meals, Jason, that got in the way of her marauding, that's where the real money is.
Yeah.
So she becomes a sutler, which is some kind of like merchant who follows around the regiment, who sells provisions to the troops, but is also like on the black market, so sells stuff like you can't get elsewhere, you know what I mean? And then is also sort of a cook. So, I don't know. But it sort of seems like a demotion, but she did get preferential treatment over the other sutlers because of who she was. Like all the troops knew her and loved her. So she did well enough out of it. She was allowed, like, put her tent closer than the other tents.
Nice. That's much like a festival.
That's
VIP camping.
She wasn't out of the action yet, though. Kit would shock the troops by bringing Richard and his men hot food in the front line. So,
as a way she would just want to be part of the action. So she was like...
I feel like that's definitely a part of who she is. She's a real action junkie. So she's now like, she's essentially a cook / merchant, but she'd be making soup for the lads and be like, they're probably hungry now. I'll just run up to the front line of this war where they're in a foxhole and give them some sandwiches. They probably need the sandwiches now.
Yeah, it's like, oh, sorry, are you under pressure? Do you want me to take one of the guns? Cool, I'll just do that. I'll just run directly onto the battlefield on my own.
Well, so that's the exact next bit. While on one of her food deliveries, the soldiers were all standing around waiting, when Kit sees an enemy soldier accidentally
they can't work yet. They can't work in the war because they're waiting on materials, Kevin. So they just have to hang around for a bit.
You give us the bullets, we'll shoot the bullets, okay? That's how it works. But, so she sees this enemy guy walk in. She grabs a gun off someone, takes aim at the man, and shoots him at the same time that an enemy bullet whizzes across the field and hits her in the face. So Richard and all the rest of the guys gather around her thinking she's dead, but then she opens her eyes and spits out a bullet and one of her teeth.
Oh.
Just to remind, she is still pregnant at this stage.
What a badass.
She is a hell of a woman. The baby, so in October of 1706, when she's in Ghent, she gives birth to the baby prematurely, and it only lives about 6 months. So, she doesn't, she at no stage does she give over too much space to any of these children. Like when she's writing this biography, they're just kind of like, and then that one died. And then we'll move on. But, I feel again in this 2020 version of the film, the bullet scene with the tooth spitting out, 100%. That goes in the film. Great scene. The bit later on where she's like, and then the baby died so I could get back to marauding, which is my true love. They probably leave that bit out. But so this whole time things are well between Kit and Richard. They're back in the love way until his old mutt, the Dutch woman, shows up in Ghent.
Do you know her name?
No, she doesn't get a name in the story.
Dutch woman.
Because the story is written by Kit. It's just Dutch woman. So Kit gets a little annoyed and she confronts the woman. She's understanding me. She's a little pissed off. Things are back on track with Richard, and then this old flame shows up again, muddies the waters. But she goes to talk to her with a cool hand, and then she cuts off her nose.
Yeah, see, I've been in this situation once in my life before of dating someone who has a very aggressive ex. I was seeing a Brazilian girl who her fella who had broken up with her was going to move over to Dublin, and I'd been seeing her for a little bit, like a couple of weeks or something. And then I found out that her ex, who they had only been together like a couple of months previous, was a black belt in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu and was moving to Dublin. And I was like, hey...
They just call it Jiu-Jitsu.
Yes, this is not working out. This is like, you seem really cool, but if you're kind of into him and he's really into you and he has like arms like lethal weapons, I'm going to go back to being single. That's okay.
Good luck to you. Fair play to you.
Let true love prevail.
I'm not going to stand in the way of true love. But okay, so she cuts off her nose, but don't worry, Jason. It's a serious crime, and justice is dealt out swiftly. Richard and the other woman are arrested, as is normal, I assume.
Wait, why are they arrested?
Because adultery, I guess.
But she's cut off the nose of a woman. Oh, was it? Yeah. Did she blame it on her and say she was trying to spite her own face?
No, she's just straight up straight spider her face. Kit cut off this woman's nose and then they immediately put the cuffs on her. So Richard and the woman are arrested. Richard is threatened with running the gauntlet, which is where each man in the regiment would strike him, and it would keep going round and round like that until the victim said stop. But Kit stepped in for him so that he didn't have to do that. But the Dutch woman, she's put onto the turning stool, Jason, which was a local punishment for misdemeanors, where the person was spun around and around on a chair at high speed until they threw up, which sounds more like a children's party game than a punishment for anything.
This sounds exactly
like dizzy dinosaurs.
This is what we would do in the playground right beside the Super Value when I went to secondary school. That you would just, you'd go there and then someone will hop on and someone will say, oh, let's spin you around. I promise as soon as you say stop, we'll stop. And then you don't. That doesn't happen. And then it's just a 360 wheel of vomit.
Yeah, well, so...
just wedges and uncooked sausage rolls.
It does sound kind of adorable until you realise that like this woman's just had her nose cut off and then she gets spun around on the thing. Now, a surgeon did sew back up her nose. And I'm sure it was a wonderful job in like 1706 or whatever it was. But... so she just like heads off with her newly stitched up nose.
Yeah, she looked like Chris Farley in Dirty Work.
There you go. And that's pretty much the end they see of her. I think Kit bumps into her later on in at this time she's like she says, the violence of my temper, which was a very jealous one, pushed me too far in this business. But then later on when she kind of like bumps into her again, she makes fun of her nose. So I don't think she really was too remorseful over this. But
no.
And again, like from the Dutch woman's point of view, he was just some guy that was married to her essentially, and then met some man soldier someday and then ran off.
Yeah, but it doesn't matter that it's been multiple years, wherever. This is basically the equivalent of what happens in nightclubs when you see like, or even in bars if you're from where I'm from, where you'll see people like, oh, there was a dude seeing this girl and they've been dating for 1.5 years or 2 years and they have a kid together, but then he looks over some random Saturday night and she's shifting the face off of some random fella. And then instantly is like, I don't know who this guy is, but I'm going to fight him instead of fixing the clear and obvious problems in my relationship. Like it's this other person's fault.
It's there's definitely other issues here. But so Kit and Richard, they're living happily. They're in the regiment together. Kit's happy that she's got more time for marauding now that she doesn't have to worry about the soldier business. She said that whenever enemies saw them coming towards the town, that they'd throw their valuables down wells and hide them in different places. So she'd go into the town with a grapple and a sword and then just go down wells and pick up loot.
What? Like, what?
She's like some sort of post-apocalyptic
Omar.
badass.
Is it like she's walking through the town and then there's just a bunch of kids screaming around, "Kitty coming! Kitty coming!"
What's that kitty cat? Yeah, pretty much. I'm imagining she has like a mask up over her face and those like steampunk goggles as she grapple hooks down wells to search for loot. She's living in a video game, basically, and I don't know. I'd like the whole way through this story, I keep flipping between really loving her and really she's an unhealthy attitude towards sex and children, but apart from that, she's a badass, which does actually make her
violence.
a fairly good male protagonist.
Yeah,
she loves violence.
She's grappling with the demons of a past relationship. She's trying to have sex with too many women. She's getting overly violent at times to compensate for her like inability to emote. She's doing a great job as a man.
She's done it. She's really cracked it. But so this next bit you called earlier on, but at some point a young English lad who had like a lordship or an earldom or whatever the fuck, some young English lad with notions chastised her for being too familiar with the officer classes. He said that she was impertinent. So Kit went and dressed in her husband's good suit, put on the old disguise again, and went to the young lad's girl's house and laid it on thick, Jason. Threw on the old Christian Waltz charm.
Oh, no,
She promised to marry the young woman and whisk her away to a life of an English lady if she would only just drop the other lad. She's just schmoozing her to the point where the woman says she'll think about it. So Kit like leaves her be to consider it, and then she's over the next few days she switches between, you know, dressing as a woman and then like slagging the young lad, and then dressing up as a man and going on hitting on the woman, starting to like put a wedge between them to the point where the woman stops seeing the lad, and Kit then as a woman is constantly winding him up, being like, you know, what's going on here, until eventually the young lad standing outside the woman's house and catches Kit dressed as Christian Waltz leaving the house and like pulls his sword on her, and they end up fighting for a bit until she reveals who she is, and then he says fair play. He admits that she's dead on and apologizes for affronting her.
I don't know if any of this story ever happened. I don't think any of this is true.
That's like the whole thing. She wrote a lot of this stuff. I don't know, but I think he kind of like they fight each other, and then it's a sort of a mutual respect.
Do you think he changed tact where he was like, you boy, I'm going to kill you to death? And then she's like, but I'm a woman. And then he's like, well, would you like to grab a drink sometime then? My name's, where are you from? What are you into? I don't mean what do you do as a job, what you're really into, as a hobby, as a passion. Come on, let's get to know each other, let's connect.
Enough with the superficial nonsense. What's beneath Christian Walsh? But what's beneath Kit Cavanagh? I don't know. I can see it happening. I think that he appreciates her moxie. Apparently, like they all become friends for a while. I don't know. I'm going to believe everything that she wrote about herself.
No, I believe that he's like, well, this girl who's willing to have sex with me is quite into this girl who's also a girl. I wonder if I could be the first. Probably not the first ever, but well, maybe the first ever threesome in the army.
Maybe. But so Richard and Kit lived like this for years, with her scavenging and selling to the regiment, following him into battle and keeping the men fed and watered. She fought with him on the front lines and even underground, which she said was the worst fighting of all. Apparently there was a lot of underground fighting at the time. I think it seemed to be the way to break sieges, where they just dig underground, but then there'd be like counter tunnels, and then the tunnels would meet each other and they'd end up fighting. But in 1709, on September 11th, never forget, while in Malplaquet in France, Kit was doing her scavenger thing when the signal shot came from her army saying that the enemy was approaching and for the scavengers to return. So she left the house she was in, and, you know, she saw stuff that like the other scavengers had dropped all over the place, and you're not just going to leave the loot there, you know. So she grabs up as much as she could carry, brings it back to the tent, And then again, with like no sense of urgency, like when there's a fire in your house, you're supposed to take nothing and just run out the front door. No, she's doing the opposite.
You grab your
She's taking her
MacBook,
time.
You grab your most expensive, smallest items. Like that. Like realistically, that is what you do. You're like, wait, I got to run out. True, where's my phone? Where's my Mac? Where's my camera? And then after that, you're like, okay, well, the clothes aren't worth it. But like expensive valuables that are electronics that are like easily graspable, you're taking those. Feck the guidelines.
Well, just to clarify, Shite Duck is not endorsed by MacBook or any other Mac products. You can grab any small laptop and bring it out with you if your house is on fire.
That's very true.
So she brings all this stuff back to her house behind the front lines, and then whips up a supper and brings it out to Richard and the men before following them into the front lines of the Battle of Malplaquet. But this time, Jason, Richard doesn't make it back.
The Dutch woman took him.
No, he got killed.
It was going to be one or the other.
Kit trudged through the muddy battlefield, turning over, in her own words, about 200 corpses, seeing many of her best friends in the army there, until eventually she found someone stripping Richard's corpse.
The Dutch woman.
And then chased them off. It might have been the Dutch woman again, perhaps. Whoever it was didn't hang around for long. I guess if you saw, like, Kit Cavanagh coming at you, and you were busy grave robbing her husband, you probably get out of there pretty quickly.
Yeah, that sounds about it. Yeah.
So while she's crying over Richard's corpse, one of the officers, a Captain Ross, came across her and he started crying as well, saying that her grief hit him harder than the loss of all the other men, which is pretty stupid.
Yeah, it's a dude trying to get laid.
Well, they have some sort of so because of this instance, she gets the nickname Mother Ross, which sticks with her more so. Like, it's the name of the book, basically. Like, Mother Ross, even though this is, like, well into her time in the army, and she's done so many other things. Like, she's been an undercover woman, she's fought in so many battles, she's killed men, done so many things. This instance gives her the nickname that, like, sticks with her for the whole thing for some reason.
So far, doesn't seem like much of her actions or demeanor would lend herself to having the nickname Mother or anything.
No, yeah, exactly. But so she becomes Mother Ross after this anyway. But so she buries Richard and then hops on her horse and starts galloping after the retreating French army, looking to kill them all single-handedly. But her comrades have to chase her down and bring her back. That would give a better nickname than Mother Ross, surely.
Yeah, I mean, why Mother Ross?
I don't know.
Yeah, I fail to understand. It's like she's a badass. She's going out there. She's more impressive than most of the men that have been in any of the armies we've ever heard about.
100%. She's much more of a scrapper, marauder, fighter, soldier than a lot of these guys. She outlived Patrick Sarsfield, let's not forget. Maybe it's because like she made Ross feel emotions like a mother, but they couldn't make fun of Ross because he was their captain, so she became Mother Ross. I don't know.
Something's yes.
It doesn't make any sense.
Yeah, no. Continue because we're not going to get it.
No. But so she was shook up by Richard's death, but also now she was a single lady.
Put your hands up. Oh.
She was, she says she was in like the depths of despair for about 6 weeks, and then around 11 weeks after Richard's death, she remarried to another soldier called Hugh Jones. She said that she'd flirted with Jones before. He had gone to fetch her eels when she was craving them while pregnant.
Nice. Eels. The mark of love.
There's a lot in that sentence to unpack. Eels is a pregnancy crave? And you're like...
Yeah. I mean, that doesn't surprise me. Like coal.
But but also like that this guy Jones was cracking onto her while... And she was like pretty famous in the army at this point, so like he would have known she was married. And also she's heavily pregnant. And he's like, I'll get you some meals.
Yeah, but you're in the army, Kev. It's kind of
true.
like, the death rate, also the age at which people die in general back then, regardless of also if they're in the army. Keep at it. Even like just stay with it. She's like, no, I'm married and I'm about to have the kid of another man. He's like, well, what about in 11 weeks' time? I'll just check back in just to see if anything's changed.
In fairness, yeah, you're right. He does. He dies, and here in comes Jones with a fresh bouquet of eels. But it might have been something of a rebound marriage because
you don't say.
Jones gets shot. Jones gets shot exactly a year later on September 11th, never forget, 1710.
Again?
At the siege of Saint Venant. Although he doesn't die then. So, sorry, he gets shot. When he gets shot, she says that she felt sad, but nowhere near as sad as when Richard had
But
died.
she still used it as a reason to invade the Middle East.
Yeah. This set up a chain of events. But so Jones was shot in the leg, and then Mr. White, the surgeon, who searched and dressed his wound, said it was but slight. But the next day, finding the bone broken, judged it to be mortal. And then 10 weeks later, the guy died. So that's the sort of time they're like, he got shot, and they were like, oh, he'll be fine. And then looked at it the next day, and was like, oh, it's a broken leg. What size of a casket would you like?
Jesus. What is he, a horse?
Yeah, I don't know. So, and 10 weeks later, he died. That is a slow death.
That's like, did anyone try taking the bullet out? Oh, right.
Oh,
that
God.
would have been an idea. We were just putting leeches on him.
Not at all. If a leech can't get it, it stays in. Also, pretty much what I've told you there is that's pretty much all she says about him, about his death.
Right. And all of this story is coming from her autobiography?
Yes, and she gives like a lot of space to how her grieving process for Richard.
Huh. Yeah, I think she's not a great person. And like,
she just does. She married Hugh for the eels, okay? Haven't you ever married for eels? You get one for love, one for eels, one for whatever's coming next.
that's your three great loves.
So she keeps travelling with the army, working mostly as a cook for various lords, and marauding away the whole time. By 1712, Churchill has been replaced as the head of the English forces by James Butler, the Duke of Ormond. Now there's a name for you.
Get fecked.
Now he's the grandson of the James Butler that we would have talked about before.
Yeah. Okay, so it's not the same one then. Right.
It's not the same one, but it's kind of like it's around the same time, and he's related to him. So this James Butler is publicly instructed to continue.
Call him Jimmy. If he's the grandson, call him Jimmy or Seamus.
Yeah, we Jimmy. So Jimmy is he's publicly instructed to continue the war in the Netherlands, but at the same time he's given secret instructions by the Tory party not to assist in any wider war efforts and just to kind of hang on to Dunkirk. So he starts calling his troops back from like various sieges that they're involved in and bringing them back from the far fronts in Europe. So the war is kind of winding down for the British troops, and this latest move soured the rest of the Allied forces against them to the point where like various towns in the Netherlands stopped serving British customers. So Kit sees the writing on the walls, and she figures it's time to go home.
You know what? My kids would probably like to see me.
Yeah. So she asks Butler herself for leave to go back to England, and he says, "That's grand, Ty." She returned to London and found that she was something of a celebrity there. So she's using her connections with the various dukes and commanders that she'd met, who all knew her as Mother Ross, to try and secure compensation for her time served in the military and the loss of 2 husbands in the service of the crown. So she was afforded a pension from the Duke of Marlborough, but was also presented at court to Queen Anne, who gave her £50 and a pension of £1 a day, Jason, which is,
big bucks.
That's walking around money.
It's probably like £1,000 or $2 every few weeks.
Probably. But so she kind of slips this one in. At some point when she's in London, like meeting with all these dignitaries, she has another child, a daughter.
What? Whose?
I don't know who the father is. Because like Hugh Jones has been dead for I think 2 years at this stage. And she doesn't really say, and all she says is like, I have a daughter and she grew up to be a great annoyance to me.
Okay.
So, yeah.
Anyway, these are all her words. It sounds like she's got
these are her
tact
words
whatsoever. Because even
no,
like you could lie a little bit and be like, "Oh, it was hard to raise a kid." No, she's like, "This kid was a bollocks," and how they impacted my easy living. Like what's going on? Like at the end of this podcast, we're going to have a conversation about whether she's a bad person or not.
We're going to have to weigh up these things. She's certainly I don't know. She's
a very cool, interesting, terrible person.
She's literally doing exactly what a man would do, except she doesn't have someone to give the baby to.
Well, nurses and grandparents.
Well, she tried that.
So all of the grandparents already had at least one of her kids, and every nurse she knew had already had 2.
Would we make fun of a man as much? I think we would chastise him, but maybe not as much if he was doing the same
what
thing.
What are you talking about? That's the history of this podcast. This pops up.
That's what all men do.
That's why we talk about fleeing so much. So people and just like leaving their family, just running away. It's common in the past, and it's ridiculous. It shouldn't be done. But I feel like we've equally chastised every single man that's done the exact same thing.
Sure.
We're not so much against genders as we are people abandoning their families.
Yes, or bad parenting. But so Kit is due to meet some noblemen at an inn called the King's Arms in Pall Mall. She gets there on time, but she finds that the two guys she's supposed to meet aren't there. So she waits around outside with a child in her hand. Now, this is like a fancy establishment, Jason. And while she's waiting around outside with the child, a soldier sees her and assumed that she was some sort of lewd woman, and said, "It's a burning shame the nobility should encourage a pack of idle lewd bitches and support them and their bastards with that bread which they ought rather to distribute among such as ventured their lives and spilled their blood in the service of their country." And he hit her with a stick. Now, based on what you know about this woman, how do you think she'd take that?
I'm going to say she cut the nose off of a Dutch woman again.
So to speak. She didn't take it well anyway, and notwithstanding the fact that she had a child in her arms, she started to beat him up.
So she beat the shit out of him with the child in her arms.
She had the child in one arm, and she starts punching him with the other arm.
Well, that's more of a Jason Statham Fast and the Furious 8 type scenario where he has to actually carry out an entire action sequence with a baby in his hands. I thought she'd just attack him with the baby, and then at the end,
she uses the baby. Yeah. Well, no, she Jason Statham Fast and the Furious 8's it. So she's the baby in one arm, and she's punching him with her right fist until a passerby sees that, like, you know, she's carrying a child, and obviously this is like an unfair fight.
Takes the child off her, so she has access to both of her fists.
That is exactly what happens. She takes the child off her and lets Kit go ham on this guy. She starts beating the shit out of him with both fists.
I love her. I don't enjoy her parenting processes. But I love her thinking. It's like, hold on, take this child for a second. I have to beat the fuck out of this man.
It's the hold my beer of its day.
Hold my baby.
Hold my baby, I'm going in. So, speaking of her parenting, she finally decides to return to Dublin in 1713. She sends a letter to her mother saying that she'll be home soon. Her mother is over 100 years old, apparently, at this stage, but also is assumed that she's been dead for, like, I don't know, 20 years now? Like, she hasn't heard anything from her.
Well, I thought she sent her a letter every 12 years.
No, see, so she, like, when she gives out to Richard for not writing any letters back, she never once contacts her family to let them know that she's alive.
She's not great as a person.
No.
Pretty hypocritical.
Well, she does meet up with her mother, and she finally gets around to asking, whatever happened to those two children that I left with you all those years ago? And she finds out that the eldest died at 18, and the youngest is in a workhouse.
Oh.
And I don't know if she ever gets the child from the workhouse.
Oh.
It never says.
That's not good.
No, it's not good.
Yeah, I don't know much about workhouses, but
it's all workhouse and no playhouse. But so Kit seemed annoyed at the nurse who put her son in the workhouse. She accosts her for being so cold-hearted. But, like, you know,
the next time I abandon my son and leave him in your care,
you
will take charge of them and actually raise them like I wouldn't myself. Like, what's she on about?
I don't know. And she left a lot of stuff with people for, like, safekeeping when she was gone.
Yeah, like her children.
Like, her children, yeah, and then all her possessions on the house and stuff. And she'd found that a lot of it had been sold, or, like, the people that had been left in charge of it had died. Because, again, she was, like, they thought she was dead. She'd been gone
a decade,
Yeah. But she hadn't got much savings then because of this, so she got back into the old trade and started another pub. She said things were going well until she married a third time to another soldier by the name of Davies.
Stop marrying soldiers.
Well, that's her type, I guess. Bad men.
But it's not worked the first two times.
No, it has not. And she said it doesn't really work this time either. She says he's a bit of a sponge who spent more than he got. But within about a year, the new husband is carried up to defend the English during the 1715 Jacobite Rebellion. So, learning her lesson, she sold everything and followed them over, jumping right back into the fray.
Oh, how old is she at this stage?
Oh, touching 50, maybe?
Jesus.
40, 45 to 50, I think.
Okay.
But she just loves the action.
Yeah, well, it sounds like it. She's found her calling in life, and it's to be respected.
So she spends the next 20 odd years moving back and forth between Ireland and England, living mostly on the charity of the army higher ups who knew her back when she was in the military and who knew her story and admired her. She refers to them as benefactors. It's basically a 1700s Patreon where they just keep giving her money every month.
Do you mean at buymeacoffee.com? At Shout Talk History.
Interesting, Jason. Interesting you said that at buymeacoffee.com Shout Talk History. I'll have to check that out. It's essentially that. She just kind of, it's not really charity, but they're kind of giving her money because they like who she is. I don't know. At some stage when she's in Dublin, she bumps into old Mr. Howell, her cousin who'd taken her virginity all those years ago.
Mm-hmm.
And it triggers something in him and it sets him off into a state of despair. So, a few weeks later, Kit gets a letter from Harold's sister saying that Harold killed himself.
Oh, Jesus.
Despite the fact that he had 11 kids and a wife.
Do you mean despite the fact or because of?
Well, see, that's what I mean. And again, so this is why at the start of the story, we were kind of talking about, yeah, okay, maybe from what she'd written, I don't think it was a case that he forced himself upon her. She writes it as though they kind of gave into their urges. And then because of the time that it's in, she regretted it. It obviously stuck with him as well, because this is 20, 30 years later, and she sees him and he kills himself. Which is, it's such a bad time they have such an unhealthy attitude towards sex. You had a sex with a woman 30 years ago, you see her, and then you shoot yourself.
Yeah, but I mean...
I assume he had other things going on in his life.
Yeah, it probably does, but also there's the... what you're saying is very different than if I was to say, hey, maybe you run into that cousin you hadn't seen for 30 years, but you raped back in the day. Did that trigger something?
Yeah, that's true.
It's not it's a weird sexual disposition where he's like, oh, I can't deal with the idea of sex. That's how backwards we are as Irishmen. Or it's it's this dude probably was faced with the idea. Remember when I was 18 and I forced myself on my cousin. Yeah, and now
that seems more, and I suppose she writes a lot afterwards about how it sends her into a spiral of depression.
Yeah, do you remember how she then didn't care for the most part people or men or her children and just wanted to cause havoc and rage and kill people on battlefields for the rest of her life? I wonder if that had any footing in her early life at any point. Was there repressed memories from that, Kevin, that may have influenced?
It might have been.
Possibly.
Okay. I think you put, yes, these are all very relevant points. So yeah, that's pretty much it.
Is that so you're gonna end the whole thing? So yeah, there's a...
Well, that's that's sort of the end of the book. There's an appendix which the author says,
did you take it out because it wasn't that important to how the book functions?
It's this sort of yeah, but it's a story of so Kit moves to Chelsea, and on the way to Chelsea, she's in a cart with 20 other women, and they're all swapping stories, and she tells them about her life, and no one believes her until there's other military men around, and they all vouch that they know Kit Cavanagh's Christian Waltz, the amazing story, and then all the women are very impressed, and they allow Kit to chaperone them to Chelsea, so it's just all them in the carriage, and then a highwayman jumps out and tries to rob them, and while the women are getting whatever money they can afford to hand over to the guy, Kit grabs his gun and shoots him.
Nice.
And then
proceeds to hit on all of the women in the carriage.
Well, actually, yeah, before this, on the way over, like when they've revealed the story, they're like, oh, you can be our chaperone then. And she's like, but of course, if I was your chaperone, I would need to sleep with a different one of you every night until I've had my fill.
Rubbing her hands together to say, oh, I can be your chaperone. I know what that means.
100%. Like, at no point, so this is her autobiography again, but like, she never consummates any of these female relationships, but she does seem to be constantly cracking on to women as a joke, but I don't know. But by the time she gets to Chelsea, the mayor has heard about it. And so I think this is left out of the book because the author said he didn't get a chance to verify it with her before she died, but that it was written up in newspapers at the time. So it seems like it did happen. So
Interesting.
So she lives the rest of her days out in the Chelsea hospital as a pensioner with her husband. And there is where she meets Daniel Defoe, who wrote Robinson Crusoe. What? And he is the guy who writes up this story in the book Mother Ross, The Life and Adventures of Miss Christian Davies, commonly called Mother Ross, on campaign with the Duke of Marlborough. Bit of a wordy title.
Yeah, it's not very succinct, but impressive nonetheless.
Now, I'm going to stick in a giant allegedly in there, because the book is allegedly attributed to Daniel Defoe. Daniel Defoe died in 1731, and the book is published in 1740.
Posthumously released.
Yeah, so initially it's released anonymously, and then after a while it's kind of like re-released, and they're like, you know who wrote it? The guy who wrote that other successful book.
Oh, it's like that.
So
like
I don't know.
J.K. Rowling released her pseudonym novel.
Oh yeah,
as was it Robert Galbraith? That was her pseudonym for that book she released, the non-Harry Potter fiction thing, but it was just critically panned and nobody bought it. And then after a while she was like, hey, so that was me, by the way. And then everyone was like, oh, how good was this? Look at this brilliant piece of literature.
I actually loved it.
Yeah, actually, in hindsight, I would take back how I said that it was a repetitive piece of fiction that had just been taken from vast chunks of famous other literary pieces and then repurposed and sold to people who don't often read good books. But hey, it's about wizards and such.
Yeah, she wouldn't, whatever about this story, but she certainly wouldn't like the Albert Cashier story.
No, she wouldn't like either of these stories. She would be very anti.
Right.
That was crazy, wasn't it? Also, The Casual Vacancy was the name of that book that she released that no one gave a shit about until she used her name. But yeah,
it's weird to like name drop yourself.
Oh yeah, it would be like if
it'd be like if one of us did something and then no one paid any attention to it, and you're like, it was actually the one of the hosts from Shite Talk, and then two people were like, oh yeah, cool, and one of those was me or you, and the other one was also you.
But that's why I like finding out. Like, have you ever listened to Dead Man's Bones, that album by the band, self-titled album, Dead Man's Bones?
Yeah, and it's
Ryan Gosling.
Yeah.
And it's very, very good. It's the whole album was recorded in 3 takes. They picked the best version of each song. It's Flea from the Red Hot Chili Peppers. It's his youth choir that do all the backing singing, the vocals. It's a beautiful album. It's great. It's all about the theme of death and ghosts. Really cool little album, but no one cared about it because it wasn't Ryan Gosling. And then the second that people were like, did you know Ryan Gosling had this band? And then he just instantly stopped. Like, that's it, done, never again. Like, it's only going to be respected on the quality of the music itself. And as soon as people start to drop the idea that, oh, have you heard Ryan Gosling's band? He's never released anything about it since.
I'm sure it would have been fun for him touring around and people were like, you look an awful lot like that Ryan Gosling fellow. He's like, I don't know who you're talking about. Is he some sort of giant goose? I don't know. Leave me be.
Well, I think, he had the pseudonym for the album was Baby Goose.
Oh, that's pretty good. Well, so we'll wrap. This story is almost finished. So the book is an interesting read. It's a bit of a mouthy title, but there's a sort of prelude to the book that it goes along the lines of, now, we know this is a fun story, but ladies, don't get any ideas. It talks about, it's like, you're going to hear some fantastical tales and stuff going on now, but it also mentions how, like, Kit died it's like a 1-paragraph thing, and it talks about how she got a fever and died within 4 days, and kind of like tries to imply that it was because she acted as a man. I don't know.
Yeah, I feel like she lasted a long time in a very dangerous war.
Yes,
and
she died in July of 1739 at the age of 72,
yeah.
and was buried with full military honours at St. Margaret's Church in Westminster.
So women, don't start thinking that you could join the army, or else you might too live a longer life than the average expectancy of most people in the world. What you should really think about is all of these 20-year-old men who go to war and die and ruin the lives of their families. No, that's she's done great. She's lasted longer than most people last, regardless of if they join an army or not. This is not like... Wait, I fail to understand. Like, she's killed it. She's absolutely smashed it. She lived to 72, while from the ages of like early 30s until 70s only wanted to be on the front lines of war.
And then I think the editor was just like, well, this is a great story and all, but let's not go nuts. Women, of course, she did die, and I think it tries to imply that she it made her look less attractive, even though the whole way through the story, which admittedly is told by her. But the whole way through the story, she's constantly referred to as the pretty dragoon, or the handsome dragoon.
Oh, like the pretty fella.
Yeah, like everyone that meets her thinks she's quite attractive.
Ah, okay. Well, yes. I mean, most guys are kind of fairly kicked.
Yeah, at this time.
No. In modern day, most guys cannot dress themselves. Most guys cannot take offense to themselves. Most guys think that a moisturizer is a type of an exercise machine in a gym. They don't like there's a certain amount of self-care that goes beyond muscles that most men haven't found the ability to realize yet.
I thought moisturizer was that stuff that's on the inside of my window every morning. The War of Spanish Succession, Jason, because I know you'll be interested. It ended in 1714. After the Holy Roman Emperor Leopold I, he died in 1705.
They just couldn't find a place to settle down.
No, if he only had been part of the Holy Stationary Emperor, it would have been much better. But his empire was passed on to his son, Joseph, and then Joseph died in 1711, and the throne went to Karl, aka Carlos, who was the guy that the Alliance wanted to put on the Spanish throne to restore balance to the force. But now that he owned the Holy Roman Empire and they're trying to put him on the throne of Spain, that would mean he would now own like half of Europe again. So they just kind of give up, and then William's dead, and at this point Churchill's been taken off the force. There's like none of the big players are in it anymore, so they just sort of decide to stop. And I feel like that's a really bad interpretation of what happened during the Spanish War of Secession, but everyone just agrees to like basically the French side is losing, but because the Grand Alliance doesn't really have a figurehead to rally around anymore, they sue for peace and they give them better conditions than they would have otherwise.
Okay.
And the whole thing kind of just ends.
They just collectively decide to say, "Feck this."
Kind of, because the whole thing they're fighting for is to restore the balance of power, but then because these other guys died, they're like, well, actually, hang on now. If we do what we set out to do, this guy is now going to own half of Europe. And the whole reason we set out is to stop some other guy owning half of Europe. So we'll just kind of call it quits and we'll trade a couple of pieces and this is it. So Spain hands over a lot of land that it owns in the Americas, most of which goes to England. So this is how England sort of becomes the dominant force of the 1700s. Their navy is killing it because...
By it, do you mean millions of innocent people?
You betcha. Oh, this is where they really take off. Now, there's no one standing in the way. Like, their main rival, the Dutch, have just sort of been neutered. France has been slapped around a lot. Spain has just lost a lot of land. And now it's just the English and the sea. This is also where they get Gibraltar, which I thought was interesting. I never really thought it, like, you know, the way that like England owns Gibraltar in Spain.
Yeah.
This is where it happened.
Well, that's why, because when the Gibraltar national soccer team became its own independent soccer team, instead of like it's only in the past couple of years, which has greatly impacted Ireland's winning record because we were drawn with them in a qualifying campaign. Yeah, they're like, well, because of England, we can use the grandparent rule that like Ireland has and get in, you know, a bunch of like, your great grandparents spent a weekend in Dundalk on holiday, come and play for us. It's going to be great. But when Gibraltar did it, they're like, it's such a small area. and how many people actually emigrated to England, and how many of those grandchildren or children became professional football players. They had one, and it was a 37-year-old retired Danny Higginbottom who played for Sunderland and Stoke. And it's like, it's not quite the A-list celebrity you're looking at getting in.
But I think it's funny. It's like the British forces in Gibraltar is such a sore subject with them, and it all stems back to this like weird fight of secession where they just took it over as a place to land in a battle in the 1710s, and now 300 odd years later they're like, we still need it.
Yeah, they're like,
it's a tiny area.
It is, but they've got street monkeys, so I could see why they'd want to keep it.
You can't call them that anymore. They're called Spaniards. That last joke was dedicated to my old housemate Sergio Ortuño. So, what do you think about Kit Cavanagh / Kit Welch? She's called Kit Davy in the biography, which is a bit weird because I suppose she is married to Davies the longest, but he certainly gets the shortest amount of the book.
Well, how long was she married to him?
Well, probably like 20, 27, 28 years.
But how long was he around for?
Yeah, I don't know, because a lot of the time they're living in different countries. Yeah. She doesn't really follow him. She's, I guess, an older woman at that stage. She doesn't really follow him around.
Sounds to me...
How many children did she have with him that, burdened her and then died?
Yeah. Now, at the end of her life, she was back living as a woman?
Yeah, see, so that's why it's different than Abercashir. She does continuously marry men, and she does live her life as a woman, and she's constantly getting pregnant.
And she never references having sex with any of the women that she's coming on to.
No, but she constantly talks about, like, having a go.
How many times do you have to reference this? I think before.
I don't know. So I wouldn't say, so it's different than Abercashir. I wouldn't say that this was a case of a trans man. I would say this is probably a bisexual.
Yeah, Abercashir is somebody that should be greatly respected. Looked upon in terms of history as a fantastic military person, a great person in general. This Kit's a piece of shit.
Listen, man, you should fucking cool it, alright? Don't you just have a break? No. Have a break, alright? Have a Kit Kat.
Nice. It's been.
I couldn't fit that in anywhere else.
There's also been not enough Knight Rider references throughout.
Not nearly enough.
But she's caused an awful lot of hassle. I don't know.
Don't strain yourself.
She's an overrated movie. She's an overrated nostalgia TV show from the 80s. I don't know what else to say.
What are you talking about, Kit? The movie with the clown.
What?
Stephen King's Kit.
The silent K.
Yeah.
No, it sounds like a person that you should look back on in history and go, yes, female empowerment and how they can do whatever they want, but also, like, you still need to be held accountable for your actions. And as such, most of the things that she's done throughout your telling of this story to me have been things that if I did nowadays, I would feel guilty about, but that's just the Irish Catholic in me. And then B, you'd be known as a bastard. That's just terrible thing. Leaving your kids, cutting off the nose of the person who's seeing your fella from 12 years beforehand. Imagine imagine this now. You're, I believe, you just turned 29. Is that right?
Jesus Christ, I was going to correct you, but yes, that is actually true, yes.
So imagine now if you're out...
I'm still doing the maths in my head, being like, no, that's not right.
No, yeah, but, it's very right. Yeah, let's not think about it. But you're in a committed relationship with someone you've been seeing for quite a while.
Yes.
Imagine if some randomer that I don't want to say just shifted, but some girl you'd been going out with when you were 17 just decided to run up, accuse you of a bunch of shit, and then cut Lisa's nose off.
That's a fair
again.
Point.
Imagine if that had happened a second time.
I know. She's really sore about the first time.
Yeah,
as well.
I know.
She can't smell anything anymore.
Yeah, she's not a good person. We're not going to praise her. She's a bad person.
But I would say that she has probably done like all the men from this time that we've talked about have probably done the exact same thing in terms of like abandoning their children and abandoning their families, but it's just not talked about.
Yeah, but they're also bastards.
Yeah, it's just more.
No, I'm going hard into the paint on this one, Kevin. I feel like anytime any of this stuff has been referenced with men in our podcast, we've been like, what a dick. This guy's a fucking dick. It's happened this time now.
Yes. I just think it's more. I guess it's just more apparent when like a woman has a child.
Yeah, well, it's a bit bollocks.
It's easy. It's harder to like hide them away and move on with your badass marauding, grappling, sword cutting life when you like have to carry the child. But I mean, she did do a good job of fighting that one dude while carrying a child. So
yes, just much like Jason Statham.
I would say if you cherry picked about 3/4 of this story, you could make a very compelling movie for 2020 if you just ignored the bits that we ignore for all men from this time.
Yes,
I think this story passed the Bechdel test. She does talk to another woman, not about another man. She is disguised as a man, so I don't know how that fits into the test. But
it sounds awful, but like it should be a thing that because I imagine very few do pass that test. But also, how many men do you think have mansplained that theory to women?
Here's some classic films. Let me tell you about it.
Let me explain to you about films. Here's the Bechdel test.
But also a lot of films that I like, a lot of films that have really bad portrayals of women pass it just by accident, where they'll have like, you know, Bond girl number 1 talks to plot device number 2 about a tampon.
I like your hair. Thank you. I got it done last week.
Exactly, yeah.
Like,
amazing. Feminist masterpiece.
Well, let's wipe our hands of this. This movie clearly isn't sexist.
Neither of these women will survive until the end of the film. But, well, you know, that's it. That's it, Jason. There was a story about a woman that wasn't a prostitute. There was a lot of prostitutes in the story, but... And
it was like, you did the one story that we could paint. Oh, I feel like we have done positive female stories in the past, but you were like, I better even out this whole Jason doing 2 prostitute stories in 2 seasons by doing a story about the worst woman that's ever existed.
I know, and I realized that like we were like, here's a positive, you know, feminine woman. All the things we're talking about are just like, it was her being a man.
Yeah, she's just like quintessentially male.
Yeah, she just did a lot of fucked up man stuff.
Yeah.
So, you know, there we go. Listen, we'll get it right next season. 2021.
Someone do a story about Mary Robinson. That's just...
Someone write a story about Mary McAleese and Mary Robinson, and then we'll do it. And it'll just be, there'll be no jokes, no laughs. I would like to say that we just make it through this whole episode, and not once did we say Dick Welch.
Yeah, I know.
We didn't talk about her going to war for Dick. We didn't talk about her longing for Dick. We didn't talk about her crying over a dick. Much like the stitches on that Dutch woman, Jason, it would have been 2 on the nose. We'll see you next week. Goodbye.
Good luck.
Good to be doing stand-up comedy again. Good to be back. A couple of months off over COVID. Haven't lost a step.
Right, Shafter. See you next week.
So that's the end of the Kit Cavanagh story. We're obviously recording this afterwards, so I don't actually remember how that story ends. But
Star Wars, I think it ended with Star Wars.
She blew up the Death Star in the end, I think. But what I do remember is the post-episode chat we just had about Nile of the Nine Hostages over on the Candlelit Tales YouTube channel.
Yes, but definitely go listen to their podcast beforehand to understand the context of all of it. It's only about 20 minutes, and it's a great story. Yes. And I'd never heard it before.
It's great, but so if you listen to... You can listen to that wherever you're listening to this podcast, if you search Candlelit Tales, and then we'll be releasing the post-chat episode at some point later on this week. Or you can go over to their YouTube channel and watch the whole thing from the live stream there.
Great. Yeah, and that's us. That's it from us this week.
Yeah, I think that's it for this week. Chat to you next week.
Good luck.